I do a lot of building on my channel, and if you're a regular watcher, you probably know that already. But in today's video, I'm going to try to turn all of you into master builders with some tips and in-depth techniques that I use to build some crazy awesome things like stadiums, theme parks, skyscrapers, and cities. So follow me, we have a lot to discuss. Believe it or not, but you can improve your building skills without even placing a single block. The way you can do that is by making a plan for whatever it is you're trying to build. First, you should obviously identify what it is that you want to build and then make a basic plan of it, either mentally or with drawings. You can jump into it willy-nilly if you really want to, but if you want to get better at building, it's best that you get experience with making a plan before you start building. One of the first big tips I can give you is to get inspiration for your project before you start. If you're recreating something that already exists, then this step doesn't really apply, but for a custom build, this step is pretty huge. There are a lot of unique buildings and places that exist in real life, as well as in pop culture, and whenever I'm building a custom build, I like to make a sort of inspiration board / page that I import images onto so I can have one frame of inspiration to go to. For example, if I want to build an airport, I might have an inspiration board that looks something like this. And all these pictures are from Google Images. You don't need to get cute with it going to a bunch of sites. Google Images works good for me, but I have used Pinterest and Reddit in the past for some inspiration as well if you really can't find what you want on Google. Now I want to talk about some actual building tips that you guys can use to improve on your builds. So here's our base. What a gorgeous looking base is what you would say if you were blind, because I don't think anyone is calling this a work of art. So how do we turn this shell of a house into a proper home that's actually nice to look at? One of the big things you should focus on early on in your build is the layout, and more importantly, the symmetry. Symmetry is one large aspect that makes a building unique and stand out from others. For example, this base is currently symmetrical, but if I want to make it look a bit more interesting, I might remove that symmetry by adding a wing off to one of the sides. Or maybe you want a chimney on one wall to break up that symmetry. Ideally, you would have a plan for your base worked out before placing a single block, but in this situation, I'm restoring this sad shack on the spot, so I'm just ripping into the walls. And that's why having a plan beforehand helps so much. Anyways, having a build be asymmetrical is a great way to help your build look nice, but don't get it twisted. There are a ton of builds you might want to make that would look great symmetrical. The obvious answer is like a big grand palace. A lot of real life places and large houses are symmetrical and can add an elegant touch when you pair it with other building techniques like detail. Think of Buckingham Palace, the residence building of the White House, the Palace of Versailles, the Louvre Museum. I could go on and on. It's really up to you to decide which direction you'd like to go symmetry-wise based on what you want to build. But for this video, I'm going to make this an asymmetrical house. The next tip I'll give you guys is to have a palette of blocks that you can use throughout your base. Whether it's a small hut like this or a giant skyscraper, having a similar palette throughout your entire build helps keep it all blended together as one thing. If you have one half of your build as wood, another quarter of it stone, and then another quarter of it bricks, there isn't a huge sense of unity. And if you need some palette ideas, here are some that I threw together to give you all some inspiration. So let's go ahead and throw one of these palettes onto our base here. Alright, not too bad, but it still lacks a bit of variation. Having this gradient of blocks looks great, but if you want to add a little more variation and break up the single tan brown color, you could introduce another palette to use as something like a trim, and maybe even a third one for the roof of your build. You can mix and match however you think looks best, and depending on your plan for what you want to build, a lot of this could be covered up by future details. But it's the small things that make the big things look good. Your underlying color palette will show through whatever detail you add, and it will help keep your build looking nice and snazzy. The next tip involves adding depth to your build. So depth can be added by either pushing parts of your build in or pulling parts of your build out. So if you want to push your walls on your build in, you can do this by using stairs, you can use slabs, you can use walls, or you can even double layer your wall so that you can add a whole lot more depth. That lets you add a whole nother layer of blocks to work with. When you pull out your wall, you can add pillars to the side of your build. If you have windows, for example, you can put flower boxes on the outside to add a bit of depth. Or again, you could bring a block out to add a whole lot of things like a protruding trim, an overhang on your roof, or maybe a balcony to a second story if you want. There are really tons of things you can do, and any of them are infinitely better than just having a flat wall. There are situations where having a flat wall would make sense, like for example, if you have a back alleyway, or if you want to decorate a flat wall with like something like a mural, then that would make sense to have a flat wall. But in general, having a detailed wall is a lot more prettier than just having a boring old flat wall. And one of the last things you do with a build before you finish it is you add the sweet little details. And this is a tip that can make this video last for hours. So I'll try to keep it short and sweet. At the end of the day, the details and the small close-up parts of a build are what makes it stand out from anything else. You might think that it's just a window, I don't need to detail it, it's fine. But it's not just a window, it's a puzzle piece of the entire puzzle, And when your eyes wander around your build, you want every little nook and cranny to have some kind of detail to satisfy you. I always say it's the small things that make the big things look good, and this is exactly what I'm referring to. So what kind of details could you add to spice up a build? Well, like I said, I could go on for hours on different kinds of details throughout different niches of build themes, time periods, locations, etc. But in general, here are some things you can think of and some blocks you can incorporate to add a lot of detail to your builds. Think of the small blocks like buttons, levers, fences and fence gates, trapdoors, stairs, even signs and ladders can help add a lot of detail. And again, use inspiration to help you make certain details depending on what you're building. There are details that you could add to like a modern American house that would look stupid on a magical wizard tower. So you shouldn't take these details and copy and paste them onto your builds. That's where the inspiration step from earlier comes in. Landscaping is an extremely important form of detailing as it connects your build to the rest of the world in a very seamless way if you do it correctly. This means anything from trees and bushes to flowers to gardens or rivers and waterfalls around your base, or even farms full of wheat and carrots or potatoes or whatever you want. If you want, you can place clumps of leaves around the place to look like bushes, then you can fill in the space with clumps of grass and flowers to look more dense and detailed. Landscaping also involves terraforming the ground to make it look how you want. So you could terraform hills or cliffs around your build to make it blend in even more and to give it that extra cool factor. Using all of these tips together can really help to improve on your building skills, but at the end of the day, it really does just take practice. You have to keep doing this over and over again, and over time you'll gradually get better and it'll gradually get a lot easier. Now let me show y'all what I use with WorldEdit to help speed up the building process and make things a bit easier, along with some cool tricks. So with my wand tool, I can copy, flip, and paste parts of a building to greatly speed up the process. I can replace certain blocks if I don't like the way they look and don't want to bother destroying every single block. If there's a repetition in a building, like with a skyscraper, I could stack an area so I don't have to rebuild the exact same thing over and over again. I do this a lot, but notably I did it on my Palace of Westminster build. As you can see, the entire side is just the same section over and over and over again, which was nice for me because I really only had to build one small piece thanks to WorldEdit. Another thing I can do with the wand is make a line from one point to another using //line. This is super helpful for making blueprints and plans of all of my builds. All those commands are done with the wand, but there's also another tool that is very helpful, and that is the brush. So with the brush, I can paint areas with my own custom palettes. I can brush leaves onto trees. I can do a whole lot of other things. So for an example, let's turn this flat grass area into a more textured field. So with a tool in my hand, I can type /brush sphere, then a percentage of a certain block I want to include, like moss blocks. Then the same thing for another block, and I can repeat this as many times as I want, as long as the percentages add up to 100% at the end. After that, I choose a number for the brush size, 1 for a smaller size, 5 for a larger size, and then I hit enter. And after that, I type /mask grass block because I want this to only affect the grass blocks on the ground. If you don't do this step, the brush will paint a sphere of blocks like this because it's affecting every single block, including the air. So with the mask on, I can paint my palette right onto the ground and have a nice looking textured field. Some commands I use without a wand or a brush include the sphere command and the cylinder command. These are helpful for making circular shaped buildings, spheres of any shapes, or even domes. So for example, I use the sphere command on my Taj Mahal build to make that top dome, and I also use it on the Capitol building as a base layer to work in detail from. So WorldEdit is super useful to use. If you haven't used it, I really do recommend using it. A lot of people say it's cheating. I don't see it as cheating, genuinely. WorldEdit really does not make you a better builder. It just makes things go a lot faster. Going back to my Palace of Westminster build, I only had to build one tiny section of the building, which did take skill. I still needed to know how to detail it correctly so it looks good. But once I had that detail and everything I like, I was able to stack it and speed up the process. I obviously could have done the entire thing by hand because if I can do one section, I can do every single other section the exact same. But WorldEdit speeds up the process by a lot. So don't be bullied into not using WorldEdit. I think it's a super useful tool for you guys. And if you really want to get into building, I highly recommend it. But anyways, those are some of the things that I do when I make my builds. Hopefully y'all got some useful things out of this video. I'd love to see y'all's builds using these tips. If you want to show off your new skills, you might as well do it in my Discord server. The link is in the description to join if you want to talk to a bunch of other gamers and show off your builds. But anyways, that's gonna do it for this video. A big thank you to all of my patrons. You guys are the best. And especially a big thank you to Gray Sweetman, Voe, Walker Army, and King Salmon. You guys are the best. Have a great day, guys, and until the next video, goodbye!